Welcome to episode 2 of this crazy drug-induced ride that we call Inherent Vice by Thomas Pynchon. I've been thinking about this book more and more as I read it, and I find myself, I've been talking about this on my Discord. I don't find myself particularly drawn to this book. It's extremely well written. The characterization, the specificity, all of the writerly stuff I've been talking about is extremely well done, but again, I'm never really drawn to this, to pick it up, to keep going. And on that note, I'm finding the plot to be very meandering, very just kind of lax, for lack of a better word, which is totally okay. I think it's a representation of Doc himself, who we actually learn his true name in this bit of chapters. So I can appreciate, at the very least, what Thomas Pynchon, if that is what he's trying to do at all. So we'll see how this goes. I might skip over some things. If I do, please bring them up in the comments, because I want this to be a deep dive discussion. But I'm really finding not very many things to focus on as I'm reading this book. Yes, there's plenty of great quips, some comedic scenes that pop up here and there, some great lines from Doc that I'll probably highlight, I'm sure. But in terms of plot moving forward, it's feeling very much like the book, where it's just this lazy detective story. And again, I think that is purposeful. I think that was the point, considering who Doc is and what he's smoking, if you know what I mean. Let us get into chapter 4 here. And just so you know, I have not read chapter 7 yet at the time of this recording. I'm going to edit it on to the end, but I figured I would take care of this chunk first, because I know chapter 7 seems to be kind of a long one. So there may be some things I bring up here or don't understand that could be revealed in chapter 7. So if I do anything like that, please forgive me. But let us begin. On certain days, driving into Santa Monica was like having hallucinations without going to all the trouble of acquiring and then taking a particular drug. Although some days, for sure, any drug was preferable to driving into Santa Monica. I've been to Santa Monica, not in the 60s. It seemed like a nice place. I don't remember hating driving through it, but you know, I guess when it's a daily occurrence, it could get annoying. But today, after a deceptively sunny and uneventful spin up the Hughes Company property, Doc reached the Santa Monica city line where the latest mental exercise began. Suddenly, he was on some planet where the wind can blow two directions at once, bringing in fog from the ocean and the sand from the desert, and all the same obliging the unwary driver to shift down the minute he entered this alien atmosphere. Beautiful descriptions by Thomas Pynchon. I think that's what I'm really getting the most out of in this book, is he really knows how to set the stage. I really want to read some of his other stuff, because I feel like this is an outlier. This has got to be an outlier in terms of the content anyway. And I think part of it is just, I'm not really into stoner culture. I'm let's say tickled a little bit by some of the things that Doc says, but it's never really like a laugh out loud situation. And I think that's part of my problem with this, is the protagonist, he's almost like a side character. So I talk about this a lot, and I apologize if I'm getting off base here, but sometimes when you have the side character be kind of the main character be the weird one, it doesn't make for good reading. I feel like a lot of the very eccentric characters are better or more well suited for the sidekicks or ones that come in and out of the story, but I could be completely wrong. I know we're early in this, but let us get into this more. The car radio didn't help much. And we'll notice here there's some more song lyrics, which is a very recurring theme throughout all of these chapters. I tend to skim them. I probably shouldn't. Let me know if I'm missing anything. Please let me know if there are things in the story that are things in these songs that really are illuminating parts of the story, one might say. So just out of Ondas Newdosis Community College, Doc, known back then as Larry Sportello. So he is having sort of a dream or a flashback. He's thinking back to older times. So now we learn his name is Larry. But Sportello had found himself falling behind in his car payments. And the agency that came after him, Gotcha Searches and Settlements. That's another thing. There's a lot of just, outside of the characters and the dialogue, there's some really weird company names and organizations. There's some that he makes up himself. Again, I feel like this whole thing is satire. The more I read into this, the more I read this book, it's got to be satire, right? It's just too out there. But they decided to hire him as a skip tracer trainee and let him work the dead off that way. This is fun, he remarked once after about a week on the job, and as he and Fritz Drybeam There you go. There's another great name. We're parked up the Rosetta someplace on what was proving to be an all-night stakeout. Yep, and wait till you start with the inconvenience premiums. Oh, sounds like a catchy word there. I'm supposed to kick somebody's ass? How believable is that? You'll be authorized to carry a weapon. I've never fired a gun in my life. Well, reaching under the seat, what kind of weapon is that? It's a hypodermic outfit. Truth serum. Same kind the CIA uses. Just stab him any place that's easy to reach. Larry decided to stash the outfit in a sinister-looking red faux crocodile shaving kit. More beautiful specificity. I'm probably going to say that word a lot. In time, earning him the nickname Doc, so because he has this little needle, this truth serum. But today, Doc found Fritz banging around under the hood of a Dodge Super Bee. Hey there, Doc. You look like shit. Wish I could say the same for you, Bright Eyes. Keeping all them carburetors straight? I need to find somebody in a hurry. My ex-old lady, Shasta Fay. I think you mean Mickey Wolfman's girlfriend. Every cop in the LAPD and sheriff is out looking for them both. And then he motions Doc into the office. It was like being inside a science-fictional Christmas tree. Little red and green lights were going on and off everywhere. There were computer cabinets, consoles with lit-up video screens, and alphanumeric keyboards and cables running all over the floor among unswept drifts of little bug-sized rectangles, punched out IBM cards, etc., etc. Specificity. ARPANET, Fritz announced. No better not. So here's another Docism. I've got to drive and stuff. Maybe just give me one for later. It's a network of computers, Doc, all connected together by phone lines. You're saying somebody hooked up to this thing might know where Shasta is? Can't know till we look. Does it know where I can score? And beautiful final line there. Which brings us to chapter 5. So again, yeah, weird run-ins with people, flashbacks, new characters, drug references. This is Inherent Vice. But Shasta had mentioned a possible Laughing Academy angle to Mickey Wolfman's matrimonial drama, and Doc thought it might be interesting to see how society-paid superstar Mrs. Sloane Wolfman would react when somebody brought up this topic. If Mickey was currently being held against his will in some private nut house, then Doc's immediate chore would be to try and find out which one. I know it's awkward to be talking business right now, Mrs. Wolfman, but unfortunately, time is a factor here. This wouldn't be another creditor inquiry, would it? She had some kind of English smoker's voice, which is a really great description. Actually, it's our firm who owe your husband some money. I may have a few minutes around noon, she said. Doc's nose had begun to run, a sure sign that he was onto something here. I don't know what that means. Somebody out there, please tell me what that means. The most I got out of it was a very hilarious visual and an observation from Doc. But in a former and sweet broom closet at the office, Doc had assembled a collection of disguises. He decided today on a double-breasted velour suit from Zeidler & Zeidler and found a short hair wig that almost matched the suit. He considered lighting a joint but resisted the impulse, which to me is a little key indicator because there are plenty of moments in this book where we don't know if Doc is high. But some of the things he says, some of the things he does, some of the imagery we are given through his perspective seems to be very drug-induced. But I wonder if that was a point to tell us as a reader that things are going to be crystal clear, hopefully. And at this print shop, he ran him off a couple of 3 business cards with the legend, Micro, reconfiguring Southland brain since 1966, Larry Sportello, licensed associate, which was true enough, long as you meant a California driver's license. Before long, he found himself on a sunny street somewhere in the Santa Monica Mountains, parked near a house with high stucco walls over which flowers and some exotic creeper poured in a flame-colored cascade. A presentable young Chicana in jeans and an old SC sweatshirt answered the door. She's hanging by the pool with all the police in them. Come on upstairs. The house should have been full of law enforcement. Instead, the boys from Protect and Serve had set up a command post at the pool cabana. See, the imagery here is bizarre, and it gets even more bizarre as we go. As if auditioning for widowhood, great description, Sloane Wolfman strolled in from poolside wearing black spiked heel sandals, a headband with a sheer black veil, and a black bikini of negligible size made of the same material as the veil. Very, very visual. Miniskirts were invented for young women like her. Man, he's got some magical phrases, I'll tell you that. But Doc learned that she had a degree from the London School of Economics, had recently begun studying tantric yoga, and had met Mickey Wolfman originally in Las Vegas. She waved at a picture on the wall. Why, goodness, said Doc. It's you, isn't it? My lurid youth. I was once one of those notorious Vegas showgirls. And she flashed a gigantic marquise-cut diamond. Up in the double digits someplace with respect to carats. Handsome stone, Doc said. She pauses beneath a looming portrait of Mickey Wolfman. And Doc noticed a sort of fake chiseled stone frieze above the portrait which read, "Once you get that first stake driven, nobody can stop you, Robert Moses." This was funny because Lee, if you're watching this, I thought the same thing. I immediately thought of Dracula, and of course, Doc comes up with, "I thought Dr. Van Helsing said that." So Pynchon has this great subtle humor, right? It's very dry. It's ridiculous, but he seems to fit it in the right times. And I think that's the one thing I do appreciate about this book is it's kind of grounded, but it's kind of not. It's very drug-like, which makes a lot of sense because even though a lot of times we are in the omniscient point of view and not technically in Doc's head, but it's just the entire vibe. That's probably a great word. Vibe of this book. But she'd found and stopped exactly inside a flattering convergence of lights that made her look like some contract star of the grand studio era about to let loose with an emotional speech at some less expensive actor. Do you like the lighting? Jimmy Wong Howe did it for us years ago. And the young lady who let him in appeared from the artfully sculpted shadows. Senora? The midday refrescos now, if you wouldn't mind, Luz. I do hope, Mr. Sportello, that margaritas will be satisfactory. Thank you, Mrs. Wolfman. Tequila's just fine. And what a welcome relief to not be offered any pot. I'll never understand what those hippies see in the stuff. So we know that Doc is he's wearing a disguise, right? He's trying not to be himself. And here he is being absolutely ridiculous, spot on. So again, perfect character work here, but I don't know. As a lead, I'm not quite sure if it's going to work for me throughout this entire book. This is when he starts laying out some fake groundwork for why he's truly here. Your husband was planning to endow a new wing for us. He actually had tendered us a sum in advance, but somehow it just didn't seem right to keep the money while so little is known of his whereabouts. And she had stepped over to a small antique desk in the corner, bent so as to present to Doc's gaze an unquestionably alluring ass, and took some time rummaging through different pigeonholes before coming up with another publicity shot of herself. Very convenient. And then Luz came back in with a tray holding a gigantic pitcherful of margaritas. And then who comes in but a large, muscular, blonde person coming silently down the stairs and moving toward them across the carpeting like an assassin in a kung fu movie. So now I'm getting some Quentin Tarantino vibes. You know what's funny? Thinking about, I wonder how Tarantino would be at directing this film. I think he would have been a great director. Maybe, was it Paul Thomas Anderson that directed the film, I think? Maybe he was the wrong guy. I don't know. I think I'm going to have to give this one a watch after I finish the book just to see if I appreciate it anymore. This is Mr. Riggs warbling, said Stone, my spiritual coach. Sloane poured Riggs a drink and angled the pitcher inquiringly in Doc's direction. Thanks. Got to get back to the office. Maybe you can tell us where to send the refund and what form you'd like it in. Perhaps if one of your company officers simply endorsed Michael's check back to one of his bank accounts? Riggs warbling had appropriated the margarita jug. I'm into zomes. Beg pardon? I'm a contractor. I design and build zomes. That's short for zonahedral domes. Greatest advance in structure since Bucky Fuller. Zomes make great meditation spaces. Do you know some people have actually walked into zomes and not come back out the same way they went in? And sometimes not at all. Like zomes are portals into someplace else, especially if they're located out in the desert, which is where I've been for most of the last year. Again, everything is a question, which I'm probably not reading correctly, but I think you get what's going on here. Uh-huh. You've been working for Mickey Wolfman? That's, let me try to read this. Arrepentimiento. That's a long-time dream project of his near Las Vegas. Maybe you saw the piece on it in Architectural Digest. But actually, the only magazine Doc read with any regularity was Naked Teen Nymphos, and it goes into elaborate description about how he finds those magazines. Luz, could you please see Mr. Sportello out? And then Doc goes downstairs and he says, mind if I use the bathroom? Sure, as long as you don't steal anything. And snooping around, he came across a number of strange neckties hanging inside a walk-in closet on a rack of their own. each with an image of a different nude young woman on it, but these were not exactly vintage nudes. And I'm not going to read the description here, but feel free if you have not read it already. These seem to be the faces, and he guessed the bodies of specific women. Interesting. And a hand slid around his waist from behind. Yarg! Keep looking. I'm in there someplace, Lou said. I'm ticklish, babe. There I am. Cute, huh? Did you ladies pose for all these? Yep, guy over North Hollywood does custom work. Oh, Shasta. Yeah, she's in there someplace. But as it turned out, strangely, she wasn't. Doc looked at the couple of three remaining ties, but none of them had Shasta's picture on it. Then he heard a low-fidelity screech from an intercom speaker in the hall. Luz, ¿dónde estás? Mi hijita. That's hard to say in Spanish. Hijita, something like that. And Doc was just getting in his car when a black and white came barreling around the corner. Wrong part of town for scoring weed, isn't it, Sportello? Mind if we have a look through that attractive purse, sir? Nothing but my lunch, Doc assured him. Oh, we'll see you get your lunch. Now, Sportello's only doing his job. This is Bigfoot, pretended to soothe the other cop, trying to figure out what happened to Mickey Wolfman, just like the rest of us. How's the missus doing? There's law enforcement in there, guys, but nobody introduced me. Could even be the Federalis for all I know. I love it when a case goes to hell. Cheer up, compadre, our day will come. And off they sped, hitting the siren. Something had been puzzling him now for a while, namely what exactly was with Bigfoot here, riding around in these black and whites all the time. He couldn't recall ever seeing Bigfoot out on the job with another detective. Oh, wait a minute. There was a rumor, likely by way of Pat Dubinet, about a partner of Bigfoot's who's been shot and killed a while back in the line of duty. And ever since then, so the story went, Bigfoot had worked alone. No replacements either asked for or assigned. Interesting. Which brings us to Chapter 6. Unable to reach her at home, Doc finally had to call Deputy DA Penny Kimball at her office downtown. This Wolfman Charlotte case is how she greeted Doc. Apparently one of your old girlfriends is a principal? I just heard that she skipped. If you hadn't come along, babe, who knows how bad it might have got. I promised Shasta I'd come talk to you first, see if anybody at the DA shop could help. And Bjornsson seemed to think you're as good a suspect as any. And Bjornsson seems to think you're as good a suspect as anyone in this. Maybe you should just conveniently forget about it, the way you do often forget things. And this peculiar reaction of yours now is typically a twisted way of confessing the act, because again, he's technically a suspect. According to the police reports, you have tended to barricade your door on previous occasions. You got back to the table with a vegetable of the day. Hey, have you talked yet to anybody over to the coroner's? The body's already been cremated and she won't say anything more than that. She starts asking about these surf bunnies, who are Doc's off and on partners in mischief. They're chicks of interest to your shop? Not so much them as some company they've been keeping lately. Cookie and Joaquin is the names, and interestingly enough, Joaquin Phoenix plays Sportello in this film, so who knows? Connection? You tell me. Outside the Hall of Justice, as if remembering something, do you mind if I just drop something off next door at the federal courthouse? It won't take a minute. And then there weren't 2 steps into the lobby before being joined, or did he mean surrounded by a couple of feds in cheap suits. These are my next door neighbors, Special Agent Flatweed, Special Agent Borderline, Doc Sportello. The ladies' room is down this way, right? But Doc watched her out of sight. He knew her gait when she had to piss, and this wasn't it. She's up to something. Upstairs, they waved Doc into a cubicle with a framed pictures of Nixon and J. Edgar Hoover. And Agent Borderline had taken out a folder and begun to look through it. The federal file? On me? Wow, man, big time. This is funny because it's a picture of him, let's see, probably Tommy sitting on the hood of his car holding a gigantic cheeseburger with a Z. Weird. I've noticed a lot of weird things like that, especially when there'll be like an ongoing piece of dialogue and then the subsequent sentence won't start with a capital, even though it's separate from the first one. I don't know. Kind of an interesting technique here. About this cheeseburger, right? For 50 cents extra, a joint was wrapped in wax paper, so quite a special burger to Doc. Only wondering if you had any copies. I always like to carry some pictures around in case people want autographs. It's come to our attention that you had a little visit yourself not long ago from a known black prison militant calling himself Tariq Khalil. We remember Tariq. He didn't do it, he said. we naturally became curious. For example, what about these two employees of Kahuna Airlines, Miss Mortella Haywood and Miss Lourdes Rodriguez, whom Penny had also just been asking about? Why don't you share with us what Mr. Khalil had to say the other day when he visited you? What I can't figure out is if your shop is really so focused on the Black Panthers and all this lets you and him fight with Ron Karenga's folks and so forth, what's with this FBI interest in Mickey Wolfman? Somebody's been playing Monopoly with federal housing money? So you guys must be figuring it for a Panther operation. Say they put the snatch on Mickey to make some political point and get a shot at some nice ransom money too while they're at it. And this pretty much shuts them up. And all the way down in the elevator, though, it was Penny the doc was worrying about. She had to be in some shit with somebody. In the meantime, people were seeing Mickey all over the place. In the meat section at Ralph's in Culver City, shoplifting filet mignons in party-sized lots, out at Santa Anita in earnest discussion with a person named either Shorty or Speedy, and on and on and on. More hilarity and extreme interesting detail by Thomas Pynchon. But coming out of work later in the day, he happened to notice in the parking lot this tall, lanky blonde, plus an equally familiar Oriental cutie. "Hey, Jade, Bambi!" But then they screeched out of the lot, and Doc went back inside looking for Petunia, who was shaking her head reproachfully, handed him a flyer for the Chick Planet Massage Pussy Eater Special. "Oh, well, I can explain this. Dark and lonely work," muttered Petunia. On the back of the flyer, written with the applicator and hot pink toenail polish, it said, "Heard they cut you loose. Need to see you about something. I'm working weeknights at Club Asiatique in San Pedro. Love and peace. Jade. P.S. Beware of the Golden Fang." Dude, that's so Kill Bill, isn't it? So old Kung Fu. He headed directly for the beachfront mansion of Lourdes and Motella, who it turned out this evening were headed down to that very waterfront drive to meet their current heartthrobs, FBI persons of interest Cookie and Joaquin. Okay if I tag along? And he is led to a closet full of gear, full of, yet again, more disguises, I guess. Lourdes, meantime, in the bathroom, screaming with her nose to the mirror, "Photo courtesy of NASA." She must have big pores in her nose, I guess, or a pimple of some kind. "You look fine, guys, really." They did, and soon togged out in matching dresses. And they take off, and we get some more song lyrics. Here we go. Oh, we get a couple. And the girls in front seat were bouncing up and down, squealing, "A toda madre," and "What it be, girl," and so forth. Cookie and Joaquin there, so bitchin', swooned Motella. Doc gathered that Cookie and Joaquin were a couple of ex-grunts newly out of Vietnam, back in the world at last, though it seems still pursuing missions of consequence, having caught wind just before they left of some demented scheme featuring connexes full of U.S. currency being transshipped, and it was believed, to Hong Kong. They had manifested on the Lourdes and Motella's flight to Kai Tak, heads seriously waltzed around with by Darvans, speed, PX, beer, Vietnamese weed, etc., and they found themselves in adjoining lavatories fucking each other's brains out. So that is how they met. And Club Asiatique was in San Pedro opposite Terminal Island with a filtered view of Vincent Thomas Bridge. And Cookie and Joaquin showed up just as the house band was percolating into a zippy version of the Doors' "People are strange when you're a stranger." That's all the singing you guys are going to get. "All right," Mortella seizing Cookie by his necktie, which had a picture of a florid Pacific lagoonscape in psychedelic colors. "Let's get down." In 2 seconds, Joaquin had disappeared under the table. Okay, what's he up to? "It's okay, folks," called Joaquin. "I like it down here. You don't mind, do you, mi amor?" So he's up to some things, I guess. And Jade came over to the dock. "There are a couple of gentlemen," she murmured, "real eager to see these boys, even to the point of handing out 20s right and left." And now we're introduced to Blondie-san, who wore a blonde toupee that wouldn't have fooled nobody's abuelita back in South Paz, and a black business suit of vaguely mob-connected cut. Cranked up, prickly-eyed, and chain-smoking cheap Japanese cigarettes, he was accompanied by a Yakuza torpedo named Iwao. And around then, Jade happened by again. "Thought that was you," Doc said, "though we ain't exactly been wallering in eye contact. Got your note at the office, but why'd you go running away like that? We could have hung out. You know, smoke some shit." "See me outside," Jade whispered, high-heeling away. The near total absence of lighting in the parking lot could have been deliberate, to suggest Oriental intrigue and romance, though it also looked like a crime scene waiting on its next crime. That's a good line. Doc noticed a 56 Fireflight ragtop. I can't stay out here long. We're in Golden Fang territory. This is the same Golden Fang you said to beware of in your note? What is this, some band? You're not going to tell me after beware of and so forth? I'm not a snitch, she cried. The cops told us they'd drop charges if we just put you at the scene, which they already knew you were. So where was the harm? And I must have panicked. And really, Larry, I am so sorry. Listen, there's somebody who wants to talk to you. You mean I should get out here real quick? No, he thinks you can help each other out. He's a new face. I'm not even sure of his name, but I know he's in trouble. And out of some onshore mist known to shroud this piece of waterfront, another figure now emerged. It was Coy Harlington, the man who was supposed to be dead, newly returned from the next world. I would have come to your office, man, but I thought there might be unfriendly eyeballs. Let's light this up and pretend we came out to smoke it. Asia Indica, heavy aromatic. Doc prepared to be knocked on his ass, but instead found a perimeter of clarity not too hard to stay inside of. I'm supposed to be dead, Coy said. There's also a rumor you're not. Story was you came to grief behind some bad smack. You still into that? No, God, no. I'm clean these days. Just wondering if you could check on a couple of people, lady and a little girl. We've met them already. And he handed over a scrap of paper with Hope and Amethyst street addressed. You don't have to go in and talk to anybody. Just see if they're still living there. What's in the driveway, who's going in or out, law enforcement in the picture, any details you find interesting. And I can't pay you right now. You ever heard of the Golden Fang? Sure. Was that a hesitation? How long is too long? It's a boat. Bring stuff in and out of the country, but nobody wants to talk about what exactly. Chapter 7, the longest chapter so far. Doc called Sancho next morning and asked if he'd ever heard of a boat called the Golden Fang. Before I forget, was that a diamond ring on Ginger last episode? And he's going on and on about Gilligan's Island. But then they go to a local fish place called the Belaying Pin, and he wants him to meet him there for lunch. He's going to tell him what he can. Sancho had a pair of ancient World War II field glasses on a strap around his neck. He took them off and handed them to Doc. Meet the schooner Golden Fang, out of Charlotte, Emily. And Doc regarded the elegantly swept, yet somehow, what would you call it, inhuman lines of the Golden Fang, everything about her gleaming a little too purposefully. She had a tendency to show up unannounced in the middle of the night, Sancho said. No running lights, no radio traffic. So who's the mob kingpin that owns this? Doc saw no harm in asking. Actually, we considered hiring you to find out. Me? Off and on. Thought you guys all dialed in on this, Sanch. For years, Sancho had kept a watchful eye on the yachting community of Southern California as they came and went. As it turned out, his firm, Hardy, Gridley, and Chatfield, had been keenly, almost desperately curious about the Golden Fang for a while now, and Sancho had been gazing out at the schooner. See, the problem with this vessel is trying to find out anything. People back off, change the subject even, I don't know, get creepy, head for the toilet, never to reappear. Again, Doc thought he saw in Sancho's expression a strange element of desire. Her name isn't really the Golden Fang. No, her original name was Preserved, after her miraculous escape in 1917 from a tremendous nitroglycerin explosion in Halifax Harbor. Somewhere between San Pedro and Papeete, the ship disappears. At first, everybody assumes she's been sunk by the 7th Fleet, acting on direct orders from the U.S. government. Till one day, a couple years later, the boat and owner suddenly reappear, preserved in the opposite ocean off Cuba. I know why I'm so interested, but how come you are? Story I heard the other night, maybe some kind of smuggling angle? As attorney to client, the story you heard, it didn't happen to include Mickey Wolfman? Not so far, why? According to Scuttlebutt, shortly before his disappearance, everybody's favorite developer was observed going on board the Golden Fang. So everybody got back okay, nobody pushed over the side, nothing like that? Well, strangely enough, my source in the federal courthouse claims he did see something go over the side. Maybe not a person. It looked to him more like a weighted containers, maybe what we call lagging, which is stuff you sink deliberately so you can come back and get it later. So something is happening finally, this mysterious ship called the Golden Fang, or the Preserved, depending on who you ask, or when it pops up in time and in what ocean. But as usual these days, Fritz was back in the computer room, staring at data. Word is that your girlfriend has split the country. Sorry to be the one to hand you the news. Where'd she go? Not known. She was aboard what the Federals call a vessel of interest to them and maybe to you. Uh-oh. Doc looked at the printout and saw the name Golden Fang. Finally, some threads are kind of connecting here. There was a brief history of the schooner preserved. At the time of her reappearance in the Caribbean, for example, she was on some spy mission against Fidel Castro, who by that point was active up in the mountains of Cuba. Later, under the name of Golden Fang, she was to prove of use to anti-communist projects in Guatemala. She often took on as cargo abducted local troublemakers who were never seen again. The chronology here ran all the way up to the present, including Mickey Wolfman's unexplained day trip just before he vanished. But how deeply was Shasta involved? Assuming she even wanted out, maybe she really wanted to remain in whatever it was, and Mickey stood in the way of that. Gah! Good shit, ain't it? Fritz handing back a smoldering roach in a roach clip. I am like overthinking myself into brain freeze here. Yeah, P.I. should really stay away from drugs. All of them alternate universes just making the job that much more complicated. But what about Sherlock Holmes? He did coke all the time, man. It helped him solve cases. Yeah, but he was not real. What? He lives at this real address in London. Well, maybe not anymore. It was years ago. He had to be dead by now. Come on, let's go over to Zaki's. Periodically, Doc makes comments. He's not just a complete oaf. And here you can see he's airing his frustrations on the fact that cops are everywhere now. Private investigators just don't really have much use anymore. Because PIs are doomed, man. Doc continuing his earlier thought. You could have seen it coming for years in the movies, on the tube. Once there was all these great old PIs. Philip Marlowe, Sam Spade, the Seamus of Seamuses, John Staccato. Always smarter and more professional than the cops, always end up solving the crime when the cops are following wrong leads and getting in the way. That is one interesting thing about Sportello, or Doc, or Larry, is that sometimes he has these moments of clarity, and I'm not sure if it's the drugs that are making him clear, or if it's him off the drugs. Clearly he just got high, so maybe it's something else. But that is one thing I like about the character. He's not a complete idiot. He's not a complete oaf all the time. He says the most stupid comments so often, but yet he has some introspective moments where he actually unleashes some thoughts onto either himself or someone else who is in the conversation. Sunrise was on the way. The bars were just closed or closing. Out in the front of Huevos, everybody was either at the tables along the sidewalk, sleeping with their heads on health waffles or in bowls of vegetarian chili, or being sick in the street, causing small motorcycle traffic to skid in the vomit and so forth. Specificity. Again, I know I keep saying it, but he really, I think that's the one thing I'm really enjoying about this book, is just the vivid detail, right? And sometimes it does get in the way of the story, clearly, because there's not much story yet. At least there's not much drive to it. But at least I have this to hold on to. For the last few weeks now, St. Flip of Lawndale, for whom Jesus Christ was not only personal savior, but surfing consultant as well, who rode an old school redwood plank running just under 10 feet with an inlaid mother of pearl cross on top and 2 plastic skegs of a violent pink color on the bottom, had been hitching rides from a friend with a little fiberglass runabout far out into the outside to the surf, what he swore was the gnarliest break in the world, with waves bigger than Waimea, bigger than Mavericks up the coast at Half Moon Bay or Todos Santos in Baja. This is a crazy character he is talking about right here. Back in his beach pad, there was a velvet painting of Jesus riding goofy foot on a rough-hewn board with outriggers meant to suggest a crucifix through those surf seldom observed on the Sea of Galilee, though this hardly presented a challenge to Flip's faith. What was walking on water if it wasn't Bible talk for surfing? Now that there is a quote. Doc, also up early, sat drinking Huevos coffee, mostly observing the saint, who was waiting for his morning ride out at the break. You can see all of the text I didn't highlight. So often that's what happens when I talked about this great detail and this great, I guess you can call it world building. It's not a lot going on, so it makes me wonder if you really strip down this book to the bare essentials to the story. Granted, you're not going to want to remove all of that stuff, but if you minimize it, how short would this book be? I'm just curious. And I understand, I think this is completely intentional. Doc is kind of a guy who just takes things at his own pace, right? He's high all the time. He doesn't seem to be in any sort of hurry, and the book is written exactly that way. So at least there's consistency, I can give it that. Doc had the saint figured for one of those advanced spirits. And here we are with Sortilege, who had been silent until now. And Doc said, ask you something? You were chanced to split the country, and now you need to talk to somebody. Reading my thoughts again, babe. And so she takes him off to, I guess, your boyfriend Spike, and Doc could see that Spike would be fine as soon as he calmed down. Sortilege says you were over in Vietnam, huh? Yeah, I'm one of them baby killers. He had his face angled down, but he was looking Doc in the eyes. To tell you the truth, I admire anybody who's had the balls, Doc said. Hey, I just went in every day and worked on helicopters. They have a conversation, a very long conversation, and then the next person that is brought up is someone called Vehi Fairfield. And if anybody can put you in touch with Shasta Fay, Sortilege said, it's Vehi. So they go off and see him. Voluntary or whatever, the trip Vahid put him on with that magic beer can was one Doc kept hoping he'd forget about the time, but he didn't. It had all begun apparently some 3 billion years ago on a planet in a binary star system, quite a good distance from Earth. Doc's name then was something like XQQ. I don't know. Elon Musk's kid? Who can say? But he's thinking about this crazy trip that he had on beer apparently, and it is very long. It is very drug-induced. But after that, they make it. They finally make it. They had arrived at the beach pad with salmon walls and an aqua roof with a dwarf palm growing out of the sand in front, decorated all over with empty beer cans. And they get high, some stuff happens, it doesn't really matter. Again, so much of this is filler, and this is why I'm becoming extremely disappointed in this book. I just put a poll on YouTube. If you make it this far, I'd love to hear your comments down below. Are you liking this book? Are you enjoying reading it? Because I'm not really enjoying reading it. Yes, there are memorable things about it. There are some quips Doc makes, there are some crazy characters that are enjoyable, but as a whole, as a narrative, here we are 111 pages in and I'm still not grabbed. So let me know down below how you're feeling about it. I think I'm going to give this one more episode. If this book does not pick up in one more episode, I think I'm going to have to quit it. I apologize, but hey, if you really, really want me to finish a series, I would be more than happy to, as long as it is a majority of people out there, because I do this for me, but I do this for you out there because I enjoy having conversations and reading books with other people because, as you know, that is my philosophy. That is the best way to get something out of a book. So for next week, which might be the last episode, we'll find out. Let's read 8, 9, and 10, which will get us to page 154. So it's a little bit shy of 50 pages, but I think that should be enough to know that's 41% into this novel if this is going to be worth continuing. That is almost the 50% mark, everybody. So thank you for reading along with me, and let me know down below again how you are feeling, and I will see you next week with chapters 8 through 10 of Inherent Vice.